If I were to ask you, what do you see when you look at the screen behind me? Nothing. Or a black rectangle would be correct answers. But what if I ask you to visualize something? Let's do a short exercise. Visualize an amazing dinner tomorrow. See it in your mind's eye. Experience it with your other senses if you wish. The aroma, the flavor, perfectly hot or cold, maybe the sound, a sizzle or a clink. But can visualization help you create the future you want? Consider this quote. Visualize success if you want to fail. That's right. Visualize success if you want to fail. That's the title of an article by David DeSalvo, published in Forbes magazine a few years back. That title took me by surprise. I'm a clinical psychologist, a therapist, a life coach, and I'm familiar with the research on visualization. I've seen how valuable it can be for many people. At the same time, I agree that on its own, visualization isn't sufficient to create success, dinner, or anything else. But what if there's an ingredient you can add to visualization that substantially increases its power? And what if that ingredient is something you already have in your experience, in things you do every day? Today, I'm going to tell you that I think that ingredient is detail. Adding detail means being as precise as you can about what you want. It means planning specific steps to your destination and then taking them, whether that destination is an important life goal or a delicious dinner. And where does this detail come from? That's the next and really exciting part, because it's already there. It's within you, in strengths and resources you already have, in the stuff you're already doing. And because it's always easier to do what's already in your repertoire, once you recognize and tap into those things, the process takes off. I like to think about it in terms of a metaphor I borrow from my colleague Terry Pichot, who practices in Colorado, where a lot of people ski. But you don't have to be a great skier to appreciate this image. When you're skiing, it's a really good idea not to bump into trees. But if there's a tree and you look at it too much, your body might steer toward the tree. So don't look just at the tree. See the bigger picture. Focus on the path, that winding clear space between the trees. Lean one way, then the other. Use your balance, your judgment. Use your equipment, your skis, your poles. And that's sort of a metaphor for life. Steer towards your destination and use the special features, the detail in your skills and tools to help you get there. There are so many amazing stories that illustrate the power of detail, with examples that range from the seemingly unremarkable on one hand to the profound and poignant on the other. I want to tell you just a few. The first story is about a psychology experiment done with some college undergraduates. One December, just before Christmas break, psychologists Peter Gollwitzer and Veronica Brandstatter gave each of their subjects an envelope with the following instructions. You are to write a vivid report about how you spent Christmas Eve, how you felt about it, and how it compared with your expectations of how Christmas Eve should be. They were supposed to do this and mail it back within 48 hours of Christmas Eve. For half of the subjects, the envelope included another page. It was a short form to complete and turn in right then that asked them to specify when during those 48 hours they would write the report and where they would do it. Like, I'll be in the bedroom at my grandma's after Christmas lunch while the kids are playing outside. Or, I have a 9 a.m. flight from San Diego to JFK on December 26th, and I'll do it on the plane, or whatever. That page was the only difference between the two groups. So, how many people actually wrote the report and mailed it back within the 48-hour window? There was a dramatic difference between the groups. Of the people who only got the instructions to do the task, about 30% of them did it. Of those who were asked to take 5 extra minutes beforehand to specify the when and where, more than 70% did it. In the greater scheme of things, writing down what you did on Christmas Eve isn't life-changing. But if detailed planning can make such a great difference with something that small, imagine what it can do for something more important when you're transferring assets into your living trust or deciding how to start that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Detail supports things that absolutely make a difference. Another story. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist. In 1942, he was also a slave laborer in a concentration camp. One winter day in Poland, he was on a forced march with other prisoners. He was sick and malnourished, and he fell in the snow. The guards beat Frankl with a club and ordered him to get to his feet. He couldn't. He also knew that if he didn't, he would be left out there to die. And then Frankl envisioned himself, not in Poland, not in the snow, but in a lecture hall at a podium. He was delivering a brilliant lecture about how some prisoners managed to survive. Somehow, he stumbled to his feet. As he struggled through the snow, he composed the details of his lecture in his mind. Frankl survived the march, the day, the war. Fast forward almost 50 years. Viktor Frankl has just finished delivering that speech. He's getting a standing ovation from an audience of 7,000. In my work, I sometimes hear people say they feel like prisoners of the past. For me, the Viktor Frankl story opens up an alternate possibility. The future, or your detailed vision of it, can shape the present, and sometimes it can help you transcend the past. The next story comes from solution-focused therapy. Therapist Steve DeShazer was talking with a new client, I'm going to call him Carl, a man who was profoundly depressed since losing a leg in an industrial accident. Life seemed empty to Carl. He rarely left his bedroom. DeShazer asked Carl to imagine the future he wanted, and he deliberately used the language of miracles. He said, "Imagine that tonight, while you're sleeping, a miracle happens. You wake up, it's tomorrow morning. What's the first thing that's different?" Carl responded that he would have his leg back. DeShazer nodded. That response made sense. After all, he had asked for a miracle. DeShazer and Carl were both men who said what was important and no more. Carl was silent for a while. DeShazer was silent too. Then Carl spoke. He said he would go down to the kitchen and make breakfast. Again, DeShazer nodded and then asked what Carl would do next, and after that. One question at a time, the inquiry added detail. First about what else Carl would do, and then about how those things would make a difference, and then about pieces of this scenario that were already starting to happen. Carl made no further mention of getting his leg back. Carl understood what kind of miracle they were talking about. He knew that psychotherapy doesn't regenerate severed body parts. And he discovered that he didn't have to wait for his original miracle to happen, to use everyday activities as stepping stones to a life worth living. Sometimes I invite people to visualize, if they wish, a kind of slideshow of the good detail in their own lives. This is a fast-paced stream of images, words, audio, video clips. In no particular order, you see a collage of detail, cool stuff you already do, already have in your life. There are photos of the people who love you and support you. Some of the clips are of you at your best, doing something you love, in that sweet spot where you're at one with what you're doing, and time almost disappears. There are images that capture something special about you. It might be your capacity for connection and being on the same page with another person, or your passion for adventure. What else? Notice an image or a caption or a moment from your life as it comes into focus. Your slideshow streams other clips too. There's the time you made a hard choice and then embraced it. There's also that moment when you knew it was time to let go and you went in a different direction. You see the time when you were careful, when you used your good, healthy caution. The day you allowed extra time just in case and are glad you did. The time you made that backup plan. There are the moments when you just kept going, literally or figuratively, the time when you were out of breath and it felt like you couldn't go around one more switchback and you kept trudging up that mountain and eventually got to the top. The time you showed up for work or school when every bone in your body didn't want to. Maybe the time you lost it or blew it and then did what you had to do to fix it. The time when life went whop, whop, and you discovered flexibility or resilience you didn't know you had. The time of strength or skill or detail from another place in your life emerged exactly when you needed it. So maybe instead of saying visualize success if you want to fail, we might say visualize obstacles and your path around them if you want to succeed. Strategize about how you might keep some of those obstacles from arising in the first place. Plan how you'll navigate through the ones that probably will be there. And if there are challenges you can't predict in advance, or if there is loss, know that you will figure out what to do, that you will take care of yourself, and then go on to write a good next chapter. I propose this equation. Your vision of the future you want, plus detail that includes anticipating obstacles and using your strengths to create paths around them, equals the road to your destination. As we wind down, I invite you to imagine that it's next week and you're back in your world, at home or work or school, and you're feeling inspired and energized by some of these ideas. You're doing the things you always do, and there's also a difference. Sparkling moments are happening a little more often. With the stuff of life, you're more resilient. When you slip, it's not a deal breaker because you're getting back on track so much sooner. You have more clarity about what you really want and the steps realistically needed to get there. And as you add detail, you see how much solution building, developing, debugging, connecting you're already doing. On one level, some of those things you do every day may seem ordinary. On another level, they are extraordinary. So stay the course. Take that next step and let it point the way to the next one, and then another, and then another. Because it's the small stuff that makes the big stuff happen. Thank you.